relevant for everybody, even if I have to reference those particular codes, etc. And I do want to stress that if you don't have a specific code of ethics that you have to follow because of your designation or license category, and you're wondering what kind of standards out there might be worth having a look at, I would say that the FB Canada codes are probably among the best. They are robust, they're lengthy. Now, those CFP designation holders in the room, when was the last time you reviewed the code of ethics and the practice standards, etc.? Anybody within the last year? Raise a hand. Oh, good. So you do that. Now, if you haven't reviewed it in the last year, and you go to review it now, which I encourage, one of the things you're going to find is they've made some changes. There's some language changes in there. For example, you're now being called a certificant, as well as some new topics. I call it a new topic raised. There's some references to some topics in there that weren't in there before. So some of the changes in that language I'm going to reflect when I reference them as part of discussing some case studies and stuff today. So that's kind of our intro on that. Oh, by the way, one of the new changes, I don't know if you knew this, as of next year, CFP designation holders will need 2 hours of ethics credit. Did you know that? Does that resonate with you? Do you think 2 hours is right? Too much? Is 1 hour too much? Good. And just for reference, I don't know of a professional designation out there these days that doesn't require at least an hour, but the trend is definitely upward. Your cohorts with IROC registration categories are on a 2-year cycle. They have a compliance and ethics category that requires 10 hours within 2 years, or an average of 5 in a year. I don't know if that's right or not, but just to give you a comparison. So moving up to 2 hours bodes well for guys like me. My market is doubling. I don't know if that's true. I just said that. Anyway, I want to round off that introduction a little bit to establish some credibility with you folks. I am passionate about professional ethics and business ethics. I have been literally writing and teaching and speaking about it for well over 30 years. It was my undergraduate specialization back in the mid-'80s. When I did a philosophy degree at the University of Calgary, my specialty was applied ethics and jurisprudence, which is their fancy way of saying philosophy of law. And that included some postgraduate research in biomedical ethics. And in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I did an ethics session for a group of doctors in Edmonton. So still like that topic a lot. I've been writing in public media, newspapers and magazines as a columnist and a contributor since 1988 on these topics, so not new to me. And my current book, the one that came out in January, The Wealthy Buddhist, is about the relationship between business and ethics and financial success from a Buddhist perspective, if that's of interest to anybody. I use the funds from book sales to help support the Foundation for the Advancement of Entrepreneurship. And in addition to that, I try to provide these corporate topics of ethics to companies, and in my capacity as director of associations, public and private companies, and so on. That sounds very abstract, of course, and I don't want you to think I'm all abstract. I do have a lot of retail kitchen table experience. Was a CFP registration holder and financial advisor through the 90s before going into management. Had a great experience doing that. Went into managing advisors, ended up starting and owning Canada's largest private debt and equity dealership, which I exited from. I continue to work in the industry. I continue as a registrant for Croft Financial Group, which is based here in Toronto. We do public securities and option strategies. And recently they've increased my portfolio responsibilities there to something called Manager of ESG Integration. Do you know what ESG means? That's the expression that's used for environment, social, and governance topics. And we apply that through our operations as well as how we develop our investment mandates. And so hopefully you see that I have a little bit of academic experience, but some street experience as well. So let's see if that turns into a decent presentation. Now, if I asked all of you, and you're all business people with experience, what does every single business person or type of business have to do? There's probably a few things, but there's at least one thing that every organization must do. I want to suggest to you that is, they must establish a level of trust with the market. Does that make sense? Anyone disagree with that premise?
Disagree.
You disagree? That's fine.
I disagree. Trust is implied. You never have to state this.
Okay, that's good.
All the time from fellows like yourself. They always state this, but it's implied.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on this. IFB, I encourage you to have this gentleman draft up some ethics classes for the coming years, and he'll have a great opportunity to express himself in an appropriate way. I want to suggest to you that trust is extremely important, and you would think that because it's so important, we'd be all good at this. One of the nice things about our business is it does attract people with confidence. I think that's required. Sometimes that confidence leads to overconfidence in our perspectives of things. That could happen as well. So let's talk about trust for a moment. I want to suggest to you that trust just describes a state of confidence in simpler terms. This is me with my philosopher's hat on. That emotional state and logical state produces confidence. And we, the trusting party, have that confidence in the party being trusted. We want to trust something about them. And we think that that's the objective, because we discuss that in our industry, the objective of being trusted. But from an ethics perspective, the objective is actually being trustworthy. Worthy of the confidence that you manage to establish with the market, with your clients, with the regulators, and so on. Worthy of that trust. There we go. That form of confidence actually comes in two types, two very distinct types, and full-on trustworthiness requires that both of those types be established. The first type is what I call ability trust. This is where we want to say to the market, trust us, we can do it. Trust me, I can do this thing I propose to do. This is the value I propose to give, the benefit I propose you will receive. Trust me. Now, what's interesting about this is, especially in a business perspective, is what specifically do you want to call that thing that we're asking the market to trust us about? I want to suggest to you that that thing is that value proposition, which you hear a lot, used a lot, another one of those expressions that often goes undefined. So let's define this up a little bit. We are in fact asking the market to trust three aspects of the value proposition. Trust we can do it, the what, and trust that we will do that what the way we propose, and thirdly, at the price we propose to deliver it. So that what being the benefit, the how is the process of delivery. Now, in our lifetime, this discussion of how is becoming increasingly important. We care, for example, in Canada, not merely about having oil and gas, but how we get that oil and gas. What are the processes of delivery? Where does it come from? On a simpler example, you go into a store to buy an item of clothing. You might say that's a nice item of clothing, but I wonder how it is produced. What are the work conditions of those folks, and so on. So the what, the how, and the price. Now in our industry, when we suggest to the market what our value proposition, for example, let's suppose we say we can help you earn a rate of return net of fees that is better than the market. That's alpha. You heard that expression earlier today. There are entire schools of thought, well documented, often around a subject heading called the efficient market hypothesis, that calls into question the entire premise of being able to beat the market consistently net of fees. And yet a big part of the trust we ask the market to believe about asset managers regularly is that they can do it. Trust I can do it. That's only one form of trust. The other form of trust is what we call integrity trust. Trust I will in fact do the thing I propose I will do for you. I might know that you can, but will you in fact do it? Listening today, I heard expressions such as the potential value a consumer might get. The potential value. One of the challenges we have in our industry is scalability, or universalizability is another expression. We might in fact be able to give an individual client such value as to justify our cost, but whether or not we can do that for all clients remains to be seen. It's hard to scale this business. So one of the challenges is you might have some people experiencing that full value because they are able, but the system that you're in makes it difficult, perhaps even impossible in some cases, to give that value to everybody. And this is what the market wonders about. They might look at us and say, great, you've got the education, you're surrounded yourself with smart people and great systems. Will you in fact put that to use in my particular circumstances such that I get the full value that I'm supposed to get from this? That's what that means. Trust you will in fact do it. So trustworthiness means establishing with the market, both by communicating both what your abilities are and a sense that you will actually fulfill your obligations and duties that you establish to them. That's the objective here. Good. So the idea of the trusted advisor that we talked about, that we've advocated as an ideal for so long in our industry, I want to invite you to question that idea. What we don't want to be is merely trusted. Bernie Madoff was trusted. In this gentleman's terms, I don't mean to borrow your expression and apply it inappropriately, but I'm going to do my best. Trust with Bernie might have been implied. Might have been implied. Perhaps it would have been worth questioning that. Example that pops into my mind recently is getting on the plane, as I do a lot, because I'm from Calgary. And there's 2 lineups to go through security. You probably experienced this. One for the regular folks like me, and the other lineup where you've been kind of pre-assessed, right? Do you know what that lineup is called? The Nexus. And then above, what does the sign actually say? The trusted traveler. I don't want to be on a plane with people that were able to get trust. I want to be on a plane with people that are worthy of the trust. It's critical. Not enough that we become trusted. We must be worthy. And in the minds of the people that draft policies and procedures and ethics for us, one of the key expressions related to this is whether or not we are being honest. Honest is another one of those words that philosophers like. We use it a lot. We might not come to think exactly what it might mean. And so they unpackage it a little bit for us. And they suggest that when we're communicating, we must at least communicate in an honest way through our words and our action. Be fully honest. So let's think of that honesty idea and apply it to a case study. I'll give you a moment to have a look, please. So a client approaches you, her advisor, had a long relationship with them, and they ask you a question. You've had a client, I'm sure, come up to you at some point in your career and ask a question about a product or service that perhaps you don't provide. Reasonable? And they say, I've heard about a fund that uses options for hedging. What do you think about this? Should I put my money in it? Let's assume that you want to be somewhere in the money business. Maybe not all of you are. What would you do, or what would you imagine an advisor, a typical advisor that's involved in the money side, how might they respond to this? I don't know is a great answer. Great answer. How many people actually do I don't know? So from the ethics perspective, thanks. Good on you guys back there. It's easier when you have established businesses. One of the things that's often said is it's easy to be ethical when you've got money. When you're struggling in a business and trying to get clients and stuff is the area where people maybe should be careful about how they respond to things such as this. You can imagine, of course, an advisor saying, I'm concerned I might be losing some money under my management. I better come up with an answer that keeps the money with me. Of course, we can imagine that. Or we might imagine the advisor going, I didn't realize this person had a bunch of money sitting someplace. I'd sure like to have this come over to me in whatever management form I have. Of course, we're in sales. We're getting paid to do those kinds of things. But how should we respond? Should we be talking about risk at all here? Should we? Why is that? I don't have time? I give the time. Okay, let's see what, and this is not my perspective on things necessarily, but let's see what FP Canada might say about discussing this with a client. So here's some of the principles that they've codified. Principle 2, integrity says, integrity means a rigorous adherence to moral rules and duties imposed by honesty. So they're throwing out the honesty word there, not clarifying it. But they start to clarify it elsewhere. They say under principle 3, objectivity. Objectivity requires intellectual honesty. We're going to explore what that means in a couple of minutes. And then in principle 5, it says fairness includes honesty and a disclosure of all relevant facts. So let's think about this for a moment. Often when we think of what it means to be honest, we might think that honesty is about simply saying things that are true. Make sense? And then if you say something that is not true, you might say, well, I'm being dishonest. And if I say something is true, I'm being honest. And what they're saying